Is that how we do it? Okay. I think I managed to go live. We'll see. Hey, do me a favor, anybody that's catching this. I'm not gonna be able to see the chat, or I'm not gonna be able to see who's here. So if you can hit me up in the chat and just say hi, or shoot me a smiley face, or something like that. I feel like it's like I need like all these different windows to see what's going on, and so just bear with me as I manage this. That allows me to do one less window, but it also sort of limits me a little bit. So we're going to jump in. We're going to go over this past week, just kind of some of the content we put out. And as always, pick up the pieces, because I think one of the things that the live stream allows me to do is sort of like relax a little bit when it comes to putting together content that kind of is by nature full. I try not to overcomplicate it, but it is full. You know, you're talking about theology. This past video is about kind of ancient history, ancient apocalypse, and like the coming apocalypse. And you know, really, you know, my goal with this episode was really to provide hope, you know, really to provide a sense of, from start to finish, from the beginning of time to the end of time, where do I locate myself on this story? And, you know, realizing that there's a whole group of people out there that are kind of doom scrolling the internet, wondering if the end of the world is coming, you know, and I get it. Like there's some anxiety about that, and my hope, like if I could have accomplished one thing with this last podcast that I did, was to take somebody who might be concerned about that and give them a little bit of hope. I think that if I've accomplished that, then I have used my time wisely, because I think that it's kind of an intense topic, right? It is kind of intense. So let me know what you think. Again, I'm not seeing if anybody is hanging around because I don't have another window set up. But if you are here, I do have a chat bar. So OBS allows me to link my chat with YouTube. So if you're here, you want to pop in and say hi, let me know you're here. Yeah. That way, if you have any questions, like we can unpack those questions a little bit. If you saw the episode, this would be the place to sort of dive in a little bit deeper, because what was this episode? It's 42 minutes long. You know, there's just going to be pieces that I didn't cover. There's going to be stuff that, you know, I went into it with an outline. I don't go into it with a script. And that allows me to hear what's going on in a podcast episode, create commentary, create dialogue, and I'm not stuck with some sort of script that I have to follow. I can just listen, and I have kind of an outline in my mind of the reason that I pulled these clips was to create a dialogue. And so that dialogue is in my mind of, okay, there seems to be what Joe Rogan and Graham Hancock are talking about is evidence for sort of past apocalyptic events. But what was really interesting in this episode was they also kind of hint at like future apocalyptic events, and maybe ancient people were a little bit more aware of the potential for world-ending, you know, apocalyptic things to happen, and they left records. Now, Joe and Graham are talking about Göbekli Tepe. They're talking about some of these ancient sites. But of course, I look at this as a Christian person, and I think that, of course, there's messages. Of course, ancient people left us instruction. I find that instruction in Scripture. I find it in the Word of God. And so I don't have this pulled up, and I should have, but the Y files. So this episode from Joe Rogan, man, I don't have that. I wonder, let's see. This episode from Joe Rogan was, I want to say it was 3 weeks ago. And then the Y files did an episode that was maybe a week after that. that was on the same subject. So I just think it's interesting that these types of things are kind of just in, I don't want to say like, they're out there where people are picking up on them. So it was 12 days ago that the Y-Files did an episode on Göbekli Tepe. And so very close together. And the team over there at the Y-Files obviously had been planning this for a while. They didn't do it because Joe Rogan and Graham Hancock are up to their old shenanigans talking about these things. It just happened that the Graham Hancock episode with Joe Rogan and the Y-Files episode were really close together. So I had listened to Graham Hancock on Joe Rogan, but this is probably the fourth or fifth, maybe sixth time that he's been on Joe Rogan. And then the Y-Files drops the Göbekli Tepe episode. And I thought it was fascinating partly because, hey, Lynn, how's it going? Thank you. I appreciate you being here. I just thought it was interesting that both showed up at the same time. And sometimes when I'm thinking about what I want to do for a podcast episode, those are the types of things that I'm sensitive to. It's like, if this is popping up in more than one place, if it's something I've already thought that I might want to talk about, then the fact that it's showing up in two different places that I've come into contact with is kind of a sign. So, yeah. And Lynn, if you have any questions about that, let me know. Cause it was, again, you can only cover so much. And I thought it was really interesting that Joe and Graham started to touch on how ancient people were, in a sense, looking into the future, looking at the possibility of another apocalyptic event. And then the Y-Files episode ends with him, not ends, but near the end of that Y-Files episode, he starts quoting the book of Revelation. And I'm like, you're onto something there. He quotes a few other texts, and again, I left this on the table. The question of authoritative text, is the Bible historically authoritative? I think it is. There's a long story of how I got there. Early on, when I didn't grow up in the church, I didn't grow up as a Christian. I gave my life to the Lord when I was 16. And part of the process was reading the Bible, coming into contact with Scripture, and realizing like the God that Scripture is talking about is way different than the quote unquote Christian God that I had imagined when I was on the outside looking in. That there was just like a level of honesty and heart. I was reading the Psalms and I just thought, wow, that's very raw, and it's very like there's a lot of passion there as people go to God just from where they are. And I thought, man, that's really interesting. That I always thought you got to get yourself all, cleaned up before you go, visit God and pray or something like that. But not so, like, at least in the Psalms, it's just like, man, I'm having a bad day. So I'm going to pray. And that's pretty cool. So, I think that coming into contact with Scripture, the next question that I then had to answer for myself was, okay, how do I know that this is like true? How do I know that this is real? And up until this point, I have resisted going into any sort of apologetics types of things on my channel. I really do want to keep it more just sort of theology and really some of the interesting things that I think is not covered, maybe in normal, day-to-day life of kind of Western Christian churches or something like that. But certainly I could do that. I think there are a lot of good channels out there that have probably already done kind of a historical reliability of the Bible. One book that I could recommend for anybody that's interested in that is The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. He just does a really good job of interviewing a lot of scholars in that field. And in particular, his chapter on the resurrection of Jesus, the historical reliability of the resurrection of Jesus, that changed my life. I mean, that changed my life. I forget who he was interviewing. Anyway, that's a great one. So you can check that out. And, okay. So This video, so that was part of it is catching people wondering about the end of the world, and rather than perpetuating the conversation around doom and gloom, is there some hope there? And I think the book of Revelation is a book of hope. It's a book for people going through trials and tribulations, pointing towards the future hope that we have in the kingdom of God. And I will say, like, if you permit me to be a little self-critical, I think that I didn't quite get there fast enough in this episode. And I think I could maybe have done a better job. One of the themes that popped up for me was just the two narratives, and so I kind of hung on the two narratives thing, I think, for a little bit too long. Okay, so the translation of the Göbekli Tepe pictographs and wonderment of why it was buried. Yeah, wondering why Göbekli Tepe was buried. The story of ancient human history is sort of a mystery. I think that's why it's interesting. I think that's why Graham is doing a great job of asking these questions. Graham is a journalist; he's not an archaeologist, and that's why there's this sort of tension between him and the archaeological establishment. But yeah, Lid's question is like, okay, why? It seems like the site around Göbekli Tepe has been intentionally buried. Why was it buried? Why were they carving stuff out of rock? My thought also about this site and the other sites, and if you look at this Y-Files episode, he talks about several other sites, and I think I don't know if I linked this. Let me go ahead and link it in chat, because I don't know that I linked this in the description of the video. So that's the Y-Files video. And he talks about several different sites. It does seem like, particularly Göbekli Tepe and a few others were sites of worship, which to me is really intriguing. That it was important that they recorded what was going on, that it wasn't seemingly a site where trade or just people eating and drinking and having a good time was happening. It was a site of worship. And it's possible that these people, and this is a theory, and I think that Graham has, is that the people at that site, looking into the past, looking at the catastrophe that happened. Now, of course, I associate that catastrophe with the Noetic flood, the book, in the Bible. Joe and Graham kind of touch on that in the episode. The Y-Files kind of touches on it, but of course, they always throw it in there with the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's like, well, the Bible records an ancient flood. And I know we're talking about an ancient flood here that sounds just like the Bible story that, it's like, oh, these religious people got there first, and we don't really like that. So let's kind of muddy the waters a little bit. It's not just that the Bible recorded this. It's in the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's in all these other places. And again, it takes me back to the question of authority, and oftentimes people will be very generous about giving the Epic of Gilgamesh sort of historical credibility. Those same people don't want to give the same credibility to the Bible, even though when you judge them by the same criteria, the Bible is actually more historically accurate. And so I tend to just go, yeah, we're talking about the Bible here. We're talking about this flood that is recorded with Noah. There's a whole nother thing about the location of Göbekli Tepe as well. But sorry, Lynn, I'm getting distracted off your question. But yeah, why did they bury it? Why did they bury it? Was it because they were worried that it was going to be destroyed in another cataclysm, in another cataclysmic event? Which, for me, again, I thought of this episode as being kind of in between two different places. This initial cataclysm that seems to have been recorded by ancient people that really does verify the biblical account of the flood. And then you think, okay, well, where is that trajectory going? And the biblical account is, well, it's going to end somewhere. It's going to end in that great day of the Lord. And that is where the topic of there's these two competing narratives out there that Joe and Graham kind of touched on. And I think for me, I sort of, I don't know if I got too like sort of fixated on that or not, but it is fascinating for me. And it is fascinating also to kind of see where this video went as we sort of challenged that narrative in this video. I have other videos that are similar, that YouTube has shared with a lot more people. So this Mysterious Origins of Christianity was one of the last long form ones that I did. Let's see, I did that. Yeah, Jordan. Oh, I thought I had that. Yeah, that was one of the last ones. And it's very similar analytics in YouTube when I look at my YouTube, whatever backstage analytics thing. And yet this one with the next apocalypse with Joe Rogan and the Y-Files, seems to be slow. It seems to be not being shared with as many people. So if you want to share this with your friends, your family, share it on whatever social media you have. And again, the goal there as I was sitting down to record this was, all right, there are people who are just doom scrolling the internet, wondering if this is the end, and needing hope, And so when I think about the story of ancient people going through an apocalypse and the future people potentially going through an apocalypse, I think the book of Revelation gives us a lot of hope. And so I sort of fixated on these two narratives. I want to see if I can kind of clarify it, in my mind here. Yeah, so there's this desire to Graham gets into a lot of trouble. Anybody that's challenging this narrative of ancient humanity gets into a little bit of trouble, because as we look back, we see that ancient people were far more advanced than we thought, quote unquote. And again, I go back to the Bible, and I think the story of Adam is a pretty fascinating one. He does not seem like a primitive, person or whatever, and yet there's this desire to say, we have evolved through a slow, successive process that doesn't have you in mind. You're not created by God. You're not created by a God. You don't, there's no greater plan or purpose. It's just that, you're the end product of a process that didn't have you in mind. So there's one side of the story. And there are people who have vested interest in maintaining that story. So when Joe Rogan and Graham Hancock have these conversations that look back into human history and go, well, and we say that these people were I just said that these people were far more advanced than we give them credit for. And maybe advanced is a strange term, because people will think, well, yeah, they didn't have like computers and stuff. And it's like, well, that's different. Like they were capable. And they certainly mapped the stars, and they certainly understood the connection between geography and what was going on in the heavenly realm. Now to them, that's certainly what it was. It's not just outer space. Like modern people look at it as just outer space and the void and the darkness or whatever. Ancient people would have looked at it as the heavenly realm, and that there's these places on earth where sort of earth meets heaven. And in the next podcast episode that I'm planning to do, it's actually from this same episode that Joe and Graham are talking about, but they're talking about the Sphinx and how they created the Sphinx to align perfectly eastward, so that, and I can't remember if it was the summer solstice, that in the morning of the summer solstice, the Sphinx, that east of that location, the constellation Leo would have been either rising, would have been rising. And so this lion statue is pointing towards Leo at the exact right time, at the exact right space. So there's this connection that ancient people saw far more than modern people see. And so maybe the word advanced distracts people, because they think, oh, well, they didn't have computers and cars and stuff like that. And it's like, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're saying these people are far more capable, in the sense that it would challenge the evolutionary narrative to a degree that people are not comfortable with. So um, yeah, I realize that there's a lot there. There's a lot there. And I'm trying to find a way to like simplify that. But there's a whole nother narrative. And that is just that you were created by God and you were put in a garden. So this next episode that I'm doing is looking into the Garden of Eden. I hinted at this, in the last episode, right? Which was, when people start bringing up Atlantis, I always think, oh, well, you're really looking for the Garden of Eden. Yes. I 100% agree, Lynn. Yeah, the Tower of Babel story came from somewhere. Babel is fascinating, and oh man, I want to dig into more Michael Heiser. Again, this is sort of a hobby for me. This is my day off. I spend my day off, making YouTube videos and doing a live stream. But man, there's so much there. Heiser had a great, I think, perspective on some of this stuff. The Tower of Babel. It is. It's actually in the beginning of that Y-Files episode. He starts with, we at one point did have one language. We all spoke the same language as we do today. And it's like, ooh, that's kind of creepy, but it's also a very profound observation that we are living in a time right now where we kind of do have a universal language. And are we repeating that pattern? Possibly. Now, I wonder, though, is that, what would that be a sign of? Is that a sign that we just live in a cyclical pattern and it's been going on and on and on? And like Jesus says, these are birth pains. If you think about that as an analogy for how these epics of time go, proceed, it's like there's a contraction and then there's a time of peace or whatever it might be. And then they get quicker, they get closer together. I'm speaking out of turn here because, I'm not a woman and I have never given birth, but I have 3 kids. And so I've sort of been acquainted with the process. And so I think about that analogy that Jesus gives is, sort of what part of the cycle are we in there? And again, I think that takes me back to these two narratives again, because the Tower of Babel in my mind is the anti-Eden. It is humanity building their own city for their own good. You can think of St. Augustine here, the city of God. There are 2 cities built out of 2 great loves. The city of man built out of the love of the self, even despite God. And I'm butchering this a little bit, but then the city of God is built because of the love of God, even despite the self. And you can almost picture Eden and Babel sort of as these 2 archetypes, and you can see that coming through in this narrative. There are people who want to perpetuate the narrative that you came from a beast, and so that they can treat you like a beast. And that the alternative to that narrative that you were created in the image of God really threatens some people's ability to treat you like a beast, right? So if I am a child of God, then my destiny is really belongs to God. God is the one who is sort of writing my story. But if we change, and this is maybe the way to simplify this, if you change the story of human origin, or if you control the story of human origin, you can control the story of human destiny or human future. But if you don't have control of that, then you can't control human destiny. And so if the story is you were created in the garden by God for a purpose, to live in harmony with Him, then ultimately it's God who controls that future. And there are people that just don't like that. I mean, they just, that is a threat to, what would you say that is? I mean, I don't want to get too like tinfoil hat and like conspiracy theory there, but, it's like the gospel of Jesus liberates people, and that freedom terrifies those who would want to maintain control. There are people who have a vested interest in maintaining control, and the gospel of Jesus is liberation. And liberated people are less likely to be manipulated. And I'll probably just that's what flagged this video, is like going into that seems to be a big sort of challenge to the system. We'll see. I mean, I'm looking at this video going, they may not like that message, because it's sort of sitting there and may end up in the sort of the, algorithm, trash can, and such is life, but it will be there for someone to find, hopefully, and hopefully get that story of hope and freedom. And so I brought up this story of, the golden souled people, but I didn't go into it in that. And so one of the things I want to do whenever I go live, obviously is to take your guys' questions, obviously is to kind of unpack this a little bit more. I don't want to be too repetitious and too redundant, and I feel like I'm sort of risking that here if you've watched the podcast video. But one of the things that I sort of touched on but didn't really go into was Plato's Republic has this story, and I think it actually is, and it's a pretty famous story from the Republic. Most people that have read it, this is the one that sort of sticks out to them. But it's this noble lie, and maybe that's not really the right term for it. But Socrates basically is presenting this idea of how do you control a society. Now he's looking at Athens, he's looking at the city-state. But one of the things that he does in the Republic is he says, the city is sick. And you can think about our modern day today, nothing has changed. Our cities are being torn apart. And Socrates was looking at that and saying, well, the city is sick because the soul of humanity is sick. The city is the soul writ large. It's where you can kind of zoom in. And what would we do? What could we possibly do to maintain order within the city as it tends to want to break down, as it tends towards self-destruction, because the soul of humanity is sort of ill? And I'm sorry, I'm trying to drink some water because I've got a little bit of a scratchy throat. I hope I'm not getting sick. But what Plato, now of course Plato is not, he didn't have the gospel. I do find it interesting how sort of close he can get, because his ultimate proposal is that you need a philosopher who is a king. That's not far off from Jesus being the priest king. But he says, and I found this. I'll leave the link to this essay, which I thought was pretty good. A good summary of the kind of this. I think it's book 3 of the Republic, where they talk about the golden souled people. So what he says is, because he doesn't have the gospel that would free people, right? And that's just me. That's me as a Christian person looking at this. He has to propose a mechanism that would keep the city from tearing itself apart. The mechanism that he proposes is a lie. He just basically says, we just have to lie to people. If we tell them this story, then they will listen to us. It's the myth or lie knowingly propagated by an elite to maintain social harmony, really to maintain control, in the guise of social harmony. And I realize I'm probably, again, maybe this video will get flagged or whatever. I'm not. We're just talking about Plato's Republic, right? We're not. I know this is probably ringing true for many of us modern people, but the noble lie in the Republic, noble lie is the public deception that Plato has. Socrates proposed at the end of book 3. There you go. It's a myth about human origins. Okay, so this takes us back to Graham Hancock and the Y-Files episode. It is a myth about human origins. And again, you can think of evolution as part of this. Now, some people would say what I believe maybe is a myth too. And certainly some people historically have used have used religion to control people. That is 100% true. But it's a myth about human origins that is told by an elite to maintain social harmony. In the most literal and immediate sense, a myth about where babies came from. And according to this myth, the city's babies are not born from the bodies of human mothers, but out of the earth. And having been formed in the underground mineral womb, all share a common maternity, the ground under the feet. So you came from the dirt, okay? So it's actually where, I guess, evolution and the Christian story of origin come together. In the Christian story, you are dirt and the breath of God. And in the evolutionary story, you're just the dirt. You miss out on the breath of God, I guess. You're just the dirt, and you wiggle free, and then slow successive process, you become who you are. But there's no guiding principle there. Now, in Socrates, he throws this in, and yet their souls and their destinies differ. So again, it's a story of human origins that then controls the story of human destiny. I find that fascinating. So depending on their mineral composition, those with gold in their soul are destined for the ruling elite. There you go. The golden-souled people. And those whose souls are made of silver are to be denied this distinction, but they're fit for being in the army. They're fit for guarding the city. They're the guardian class. Everyone else, though, the general populace, are left to their private occupations, benefiting in the baser metals which they are made of. So that's bronze and iron. So they are the bronze-souled people. And they're not fit to rule, and they're not fit to be guardians. You just have to fall in line. And you have to listen to the people who know better than you. And that could be a technological elite, that could be whatever ruling class that might be today. That's what Plato was having Socrates propose, and I wonder if that's not what you see. That's not what you see happening today. Is again, if you can control the story of human origin, you can control the story of human destiny. And I want to propose that the story of human destiny is a great one. I think it's a beautiful story of destiny. And I think the story of our origin is beautiful. And Graham is touching on that, even though Graham's not a Christian. And that'll come out in the next episode that I do, because I think I'm kind of committed to doing that next episode. All right. Yeah, and again, ultimately, so Socrates didn't have the gospel, but if you think about it, if he did, what you have in the gospel is it's not just a narrative, it's not just a story. It is those things, but I think it's true, and I think that gives it even more power because it's true to reality. It is the story. God created this reality. It's his game that we're playing, and then he gave us, hey, here's how you play this game. So I think that the gospel is ultimately a great story, but one of the things that makes it great is that it's true. And it is a story that would allow people to be free in and amongst diversity. Now, I think, too, if you think about it, again, Socrates is trying to cure the ills of the city here. He's trying to cure something that has gone wrong. So for me, not only is the gospel good for ordering society, this is kind of Jordan Peterson's project right now. He's sort of looking at Christianity or the gospel or the person of Jesus or what Jesus taught as sort of a utilitarian form or even a story that would help sort of bring unity within society. But you can't separate that from the person of Jesus. I think only with the person of Jesus, not only do you have the sort of structure for ordering good society, you have a cure for what is for the ill of the soul. You have the cure for the sickness that is inside the human soul that perpetuates chaos within the city. And so that to me is a great hope. It is a great hope. And ultimately, it's not, again, I guess Socrates was thinking we needed a philosopher king. You can look at Hebrews. You need a priest. The priest king. The priest is the one who connects people to God, back into harmony with God. And of course, Jesus can do that because he's fully God and fully human, right? So that harmony can take place. And that's really what we need. And I think that that's beautiful. There's this other video. I may end up using this in the next episode. But I just thought this was really interesting. Kat Von D went on Allie Beth Stuckey's podcast. Okay, I know that seems like a crazy segue there for a second, but bear with me. I don't know Allie Beth Stuckey. I feel like I'm going to say her last name wrong, but such is life. Stuckey. She just seems like such a. I don't want to be judgmental or anything like this. She seems like a beautiful lady, but she is obviously very different from Kat Von D. They come from very different backgrounds. Kat grew up in Mexico. I believe she said this in her interview. She is the daughter of immigrant parents. I forget where her parents are from, but she was born in Mexico and they eventually came to America. I don't know the tie there. Maybe they had immigrated to America first and then went to Mexico as missionaries where Kat and her siblings were born. But I just think about this. Okay, so Kat became a Christian. She kind of grew up as a Christian, but wasn't really living it, and recently got baptized, and kind of caused, I don't know if it went viral or whatever. I thought it was really interesting that I think they showed the video of her baptism. I was going to try to scrub through here and find it, but it was funny because a lot of the normie evangelical, I don't know, some Christians just got angry at her. It's like, well, why? Why can't you just take the win there? Somebody is saying hey, I want to give my life to Jesus and here's my baptism. I wanted to document my baptism. I wanted to share it with the people that follow me on social media. And she kind of got ridiculed by some part of the Christian community, I guess, sort of ridiculed her for that, which I find sort of lame. But I just thought this interview was really fascinating. I'm really interested in Kat's story, so I'm glad that she went on this podcast. And there you go, you get a free ad if you're watching on YouTube. Maybe I'll just let it play. It's muted, so you shouldn't hear it. But anyway, this episode was fascinating, partly because Kat Von D and Allie Beth Stuckey's stories are so different. Now, I know that this seems like a hard segue here, but we were just talking about how the gospel brings unity to the city where there's diversity, where there's sickness that needs to be addressed. There's something going on in the soul of humanity that needs saving, needs repairing. And what would happen in this Socratic example, this humanistic example, I'll say, is that what would happen is you have these ruling class people, these elites trying to maintain harmony. But the only way that they can really maintain harmony is by synthesizing and manufacturing harmony in the form of uniformity. That the humanistic form of harmony is uniformity. You cannot maintain diversity in the city of man if the soul is sick and hasn't been addressed. The only way you can maintain, and I'm using dreaded air quotes here, harmony, is if everybody just falls in line. And there is no freedom in that. That's just tyranny, okay? And yet then you have this happening right before your eyes. And if you're listening to this replay on just the audio version, it's just Kat Von D is a tattooed, dark-haired, dark clothes. And Ally Beth Stuckey is like this, just, I don't know, what do you, I don't want to, again, I'm not trying to be harsh, but she just looks like a suburban mom. She's very blonde. She's very white. She seems like a lovely person, who seems to, but they both love Jesus. That's the key here, is that there is unity in and amongst this diversity. That to me, there you go. That's them both sitting on the couch. Like, that to me is a beautiful picture. Yes, they're both women. Okay, so they share that in common, but they both come from very different backgrounds. One person is from Mexico, the daughter of immigrants. Another, I don't actually know Ally Beth Stuckey's story too well, but maybe just had sort of a normal American upbringing, but both love Jesus. That's the beauty of the freedom and the harmony that comes from the gospel. And the alternative story is just, if you want to maintain it, without Christ, any human attempt to achieve harmony ends in chaos or tyranny. That's just, you just look at human history, and that's the case. Sorry if I feel like I'm getting on a little bit of a soapbox here, but I don't know. I just love that. I love that that's there. And so that's the hope for me. That's what I hope to bring to people. The gospel creates unity, and not uniformity. There was another one. This video. I wonder if I can play this. So I made a short featuring Oz Guinness from the ARC conference. I thought it was really good. And basically, let me see. Let's just play it and see what happens. No, yeah, okay, let's see. Nope, I don't want to. There we go.
Everything's power. So I would say bluntly about the radical left, their revolutions never succeed, their oppressions never end, and their promised futures never arrive. Compare that with the Jewish and Christian understanding. You address truth to power and call for an about turn of heart and mind. And the freedom to go wrong is also the freedom to say, I was wrong, I need to change. And forgiveness is built on freedom. Yes, we're both tackling injustice, but you come out in very, very different directions. If there's
So there you go. If there's no
truth, everything's power.
Everything's power. If there's no truth, everything's power. So if you don't have the gospel, again, it's you end in chaos or tyranny. I just thought that was that when he said that, it seems to like very succinctly communicate this point that we're trying to make. Now he says the radical left, their revolutions never, produce freedom or whatever. He said it better than I did. And it's funny, I just listened to it, but why am I blanking on what he said? A lot of people thought that Oz was, because he's being critical of maybe what he calls the left. I would just say that's just humanism. I really think that these two narratives that we're talking about, these two options, these two stories, these two stories about human origin that then convert into the story of human destiny. It's really just like humanism or faith in God, like faith in humanity or faith in God. I don't know how to say that. Like, you either believe, I guess you believe in God or, I don't know how would you say that? But there's just the humanistic idea, which is there is no God and we're just here. And then there's the theistic idea that God created us. And those form two narratives. And what Oz is saying is one of these narratives never sort of produces what it promises. The other narrative actually does produce freedom because there's forgiveness. I just thought that was really good. So that to me, the Kat Von D interview with Ally Beth Stuckey, Oz saying this, I thought was, it sort of helps clarify that. So here's one. Let's see. Matthew 25 was the passage that I used at the end of this podcast. And again, my eschatology, which is kind of the study of these epochs of time, and where we're leading, where we're going. My eschatology is pretty simple, and maybe needs to be developed a little bit more. I do see people kind of, I guess you would say, like, it can be hard to navigate this stuff. We can just be honest about that. It can be hard to navigate. It can be hard to understand how should I live in the present moment. But then again, like, could it just be simple? Could it be as simple as this parable, that I shared, that you live your life in anticipation of the bridegroom coming, but you bring extra oil. You keep your lamp shining. You keep your light shining in the darkness. Isn't it? Yeah, it's Matthew 24. So actually that parable of the virgins comes right after Jesus has this conversation with his disciples in Matthew 24 about the end times. And this is where, it can be confusing. It can be, Jesus says a lot. And how do we sort of interpret it? How do we live? How do we apply it to our lives? Because this is where he talks about birth pains, right? Don't let anyone mislead you. Many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ. I will mislead many. And you will be hearing of wars. This is 25 verse 6. You will be hearing of wars, rumors of wars. See that you're not frightened, for these things must take place. But that is not yet the end. I wonder how many of us, even like in the church, who claim Christianity and want to live faithful to Jesus, like we sort of, to us, this passage, you will be hearing of wars and the rumors of wars, kind of stands out big and bold because, of course, we see it happening. And yet this very next sentence that Jesus gives his followers seems somehow to be in a lower resolution. See that you are not frightened, for these things must take place. He's like, I got this. I know what's going to happen. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. In various places there will be famines and earthquakes. But these things are merely the beginnings of the birth pains. And so there's this process that we're living through. And that's how, But these things are merely the beginning of birth pains. They will deliver you into tribulation. And again, that's where the book of Revelation for me is not a book about, it is a book about an apocalyptic event. It is the book of it's apocalyptic in nature, but it is written for people who are enduring tribulation, for, I think, the purpose of hope. Matthew 24 is worth reading again. He who endures to the end will be saved. The gospel of the kingdom will spread into the whole world and the testimony of all the nations, and then the end will come. And again, this is that the gospel is universal. The gospel of Jesus Christ is not attached to any nation, tribe, tongue, or language. But it infiltrates every nation, tribe, tongue, and language, because it is ultimately the Creator's story. He created this world, and that's His story going through into everyone's heart and mind. And in a sense, it's sort of like almost without changing all of culture, it is transformative. I think that's where sometimes we sort of make the mistake. You sort of think, like when I was a new Christian, it was like, burn all your CDs and stuff like that. It's like, maybe that's okay. Maybe that's not bad advice. Some of those CDs were pretty bad, but some people just make good music, and it's not necessarily, they might not necessarily be Christian. I don't know. I will say this. I hope you guys are doing well, and I hope that this is encouraging. I guess I'll leave you hopefully with that hope. Matthew 24 and 25, the parable of virgins, again, to me is just very simple. keep your light shining. How do I keep my light shining? I want to actually give a shout out. If you're still here and you're watching this, this is value added here. Okay, so I'm like loosely connected to this special operations equipment through a family member, and this channel is pretty cool. It is pretty raw, so just like buckle up if you start watching some of these videos that John puts out. But they do a self-reliance festival like twice a year, and I went to one in the spring. And the reason I bring this up is a lot of the conversation in this community is about sort of being prepared. And there's sort of a doomsday prepper kind of mindset out there that's like, I just need to get freeze-dried foods. And those are good, build a bunker. Hey, build a bunker if you want to. But there's a part of preparing, and this goes back to the parable of the 10 of the wise virgins. I guess 5 were wise and 5 were foolish. How do I keep my light burning bright in this dark place? How do I prepare myself? And I do think, and I say this because I have a family, I have a wife and kids. I want my kids to be safe. I want my family to have food. I want to be prepared as best as I can. I live in a tornado zone, so like we've got freeze-dried food. We've got that stuff. We're not as prepared as I would like to be. And so I love these guys. I love conversations about homesteading and stuff like that. And I do think that is something that we're waking up to is, again, and this even ties into Socrates and the soul of the city being sick. There is something to getting out into the country. There is something to taking a break from the city. And I'm bringing up special operations partly because this is a group of people that is talking about survival and preparedness and homesteading. But time and time again, I'm highlighting this episode with Bear Independent, and actually I'll link this one in the chat as well. Time and time again, the conversation will turn to the spiritual health of a community. And that is something that we need to really talk more about when it comes to preparedness, when it comes to maybe even these end times experiences that we might be facing, might be going through as maybe birth pains increase. How do we prepare our communities? And one of the things, I'll just say this, is I want to be an asset to my community. I don't want to be a liability. I don't want to be a person crippled by fear of the what ifs. I want to be a person who can be a person of courage and hope, who can help my community. So shout out to these guys, because as kind of raw and intense as John can be and some of these conversations can be, there is like a spiritual there's like almost like a spiritual awakening going on in and amongst this group of for lack of a better word, preppers or whatever, in a healthy way. Like I've seen this become unhealthy in certain people. The doomsday prepper, a lot of these guys, they're not freaking out. It's like, be prepared, don't be scared. That's what Jesus is saying. He's like, do not fear. This is the world that we live in. There's this one with Bear, and I don't see it, but there was another one where Joel Salatin. Gosh, I haven't watched this, but I want to watch this. I'm so bummed that I didn't make it to this last Self-Reliance Festival because Joel Salatin was there. I was in Idaho, and so I enjoyed being in Idaho. But there is one where he interviewed a Russian Orthodox guy, and it just blew me away. So I will try to find that, and I will share that link in the description of this video after the live stream is over. But shout out to SOE and just the culture over here at SOE. Actually, this interview too, Nati Bali, I'm probably saying her name really wrong. But this was really cool too. She's she's part of what's called a food church. That was really cool. I'll share that one. But yeah, there's just all these conversations going on in and amongst this sort of survival prepper space that's like, hey, make sure your heart and your mind and your soul is ready to, like, don't just, you can have all the freeze-dried food. I mean, in fact, I'm actually, there's a bin of freeze-dried food over here to my left. You can have all the freeze-dried food you want, but if you lose heart, if you just are a person of fear, you're not going to be an asset to your community. So I hope this is encouraging. Thanks for being here on the live stream. I do enjoy doing this. And I look forward to catching you guys in the next one. So with that, again, share the show with friends. Share it on social media. Hit me up if you have questions, because I would love to handle more questions during live streams. Like I said, I will catch you in the next one. If you're watching this on the video, the recorded video, check the description below for the links and stuff like that. So, and I will